Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is holding its third ballot on the succession of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Ban steps down at the end of 2016 after serving two 5-year terms. The candidate chosen unanimously by the Security Council will be recommended for appointment by the UN General Assembly and will start work in January 2017. 10 candidates, 5 men and 5 women, are vying for the post. One of them is Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova. Former Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres was the front-runner after a second ballot on the 5th of August, with former Serbian Foreign Minister Vuk Jeremic just behind him. Well, let's get you more on that vote now. I'm joined live from New York by our UN correspondent, Nick Harper. Nick, what more can you tell us about the secret ballot? When is it likely to take place?
Well, it's taking place in just under 2 hours from now in the afternoon New York time here on Monday. It is the third round of voting, the third straw poll, as they like to call it. Essentially, it's an opportunity for the 15 members of the Security Council to go over the list of candidates, of which there are 10, and try and whittle down that list. They have an opportunity on a piece of paper to mark whether they encourage, discourage or have no opinion, and they do that for each one of the candidates. And then all of those 3 columns, they're totted up to see how each one of the candidates has done. Essentially, it's not an opportunity to get rid of any of the candidates or to definitively decide that they will absolutely go ahead to become the next Secretary General, but it does at least form everyone's thinking and show the candidates what the different member states feel about their candidacy. And as we have seen from the last 2 straw polls, for some of those candidates who do less well, it's an opportunity for them to decide to withdraw from the race.
Well, of course, we do have a little bit of an idea of what Ban Ki-moon is thinking. He suggests that it's time that a woman became Secretary General. When we look at the list of 10 contenders, are there any female candidates that stand out?
Yeah, very interesting, those comments from Ban Ki-moon, because obviously as the Secretary General he doesn't do endorsements, but this came as close to any opinion that he's given so far about the race. In terms of those top female candidates, 5 out of the 10 remaining candidates are women. Out of the last 2 straw polls, the highest ranking female was Irina Bokova. She is the head of UNESCO, and after her, the second place female was the 6th in the entire list. That was Helen Clark, the current head of the UN Development Programme, the former New Zealand Prime Minister. So both of them have done quite well, but there are a lot of men in the running above them, men who have done consistently well from both of those straw polls. So although there is this desire for a woman to be the next Secretary General for the first time ever, it is something of a struggle, it seems, for those women to move up through the ranks in this voting process.
Well, of course, Nick, gender is one issue, but the other seems to be nationality. We understand there's some level of power play when it comes to these candidates and the regions they represent. What more can you tell us about that?
Absolutely, yes. We've never had a Secretary General from the Eastern Europe region of the world. So the thinking going into this is that this time round it should be someone from one of those Eastern Bloc countries. And as a result, we've seen far more contenders and candidates from that region. However, it's often not necessarily down to the region, even though it may be their turn, and it sometimes comes down to just the strength of the candidate. But also something else that definitely comes into play, especially in terms of the power play, is whether or not any of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council actively dislike the candidates, because they have an opportunity to veto the candidates, to simply say that no, they would not vote for them, and therefore that candidate can go no further. They don't even get to the formal vote. So there are certainly things at play. Another one is the fact that we're perhaps seeing the resurgence of the old boys club. Antonio Guterres, who came first in the last 2 straw polls, even though there's a desire for a woman to run, the thinking is that he is something of an old boys club member within the United Nations. He was also the former High Commissioner for Refugees. So perhaps the combination of that and also the fact that the world is facing the worst refugee crisis at the moment since the Second World War, there is perhaps a desire to have a man who knows about the refugee crisis as the next Secretary General. But of course, this is the third round of voting. In the past, we had as many as 9 rounds of straw polls, so there's perhaps still some way to go before we get a final decision.
Indeed. Well, thanks very much for that update. Nick Harper live for us there in New York, where members of the Security Council are set to go to a secret ballot over the next leader of the UN, of course, that taking place in the next 2 hours.